few years later, we needed to go to a bigger venue.
So how do we make money, or how do we do business? So we do that by acting as a trusted third party between buyers and sellers, and we take commission from both of them, amounting to a total of 21%. So this is how we are trying to build a business that is not only fulfilling the needs of our users and our investors, but also generates money. We want to be a business that not only grows for the sake of growing, but is also profitable. So in order to afford to be charging that much, quotes, instead of quotes here, we have 100% curated auctions. We have around 200 in-house experts, they're actual Catawiki employees, that screen every single item that we sell on the platform to weed out the fake and to weed out anything that we don't consider a special item, anything that doesn't fit within our value proposition. So let's play a little game around items that we sell. Those are a few items that we've sold recently on Catawiki, and I would like for you to guess if we sold it for higher or lower than the price that's going to appear. If you think it's higher, please raise your hands. If you think it's lower, you don't have to do anything. So we sold this 1969 Bentley T two-door saloon at the end of last year. Do you think we sold it for higher than 35,000 or lower?
Higher.
I actually don't have the answer, so
And the answer is higher. It was sold for 41K.
Huh? Oh.
We sold this Les Paul guitar played and smashed live by Marilyn Manson. So talking about special items, right? You don't find that every day or everywhere.
How do you know it's Bentley?
Because we have the video of the concert.
Wow! Amazing.
So, 4,000 euros. Do you think we sold it for less or for more?
Well, as Marilyn mentioned.
That's what.
He smashes a lot, right?
Yeah, it's a bit and a half says more. And the answer is?
And the people who thought that it was less are correct this time. It was sold for 2,500.
We could have gotten it for 3,000. What?
Smashed live.
Okay, next time you can do our marketing for this item.
Perfect.
Finally, we have this comic book, Amazing Fantasy number 15, which is the first comic book featuring a full story of Spider-Man. So not Spider-Man in the supporting role, but the first full story of Spider-Man. We have a price of 8,000. Do you think we sold it for more or for less?
What was the condition of the
It was pretty mint.
mint? Still in the packaging?
I don't know.
Oh,
I can find out, but it's already sold.
oh.
So it looks like we have a lot of comics enthusiasts.
Yes.
It was sold for more, 9,000 euros.
Wow.
All right. Let us say a few words about working at Catawiki. Please meet the recent new joiners. And to build our team, we also need special people to sell special items. We're an international team. We're currently a scale-up, but with a sort of a startup mentality. We also are organized around multidisciplinary product teams. And we, of course, are data-driven as much as we can. We recently formulated our values as a company, and we're really trying to put them in practice in everyday and also in our reviews, appraisals, and everyday business. Those are the principles that we live by. And of course, we sponsor and support great meetups.
Woohoo!
We also play with all of these technologies on every day. And if you have more questions, you can find Vincent and me after the talks, and we'll be happy to answer your questions.
All right, enjoy the talks.
Thank you, Vincent. Thank you, Svetlana, and Catawiki for hosting and sponsoring this event. So let's get started with the first talk. I wonder who. Oh, sorry. Sorry.
Can someone steal this one, please?
Yeah, you can take it. You have the microphone?
No, I have.
Good. But this for the audience?
No, I have one that's clicked to me.
That's for the live stream. This is for the audience.
Do I have to?
Thanks.
Yeah, that's exactly when you go for it.
So yeah, it's a little bit tricky to see, like, am I in the screen, or is the screen in the screen, or is it actually on? So hello everyone, welcome again. My talk is going to be about Crystal, because I have talked to a lot of you on previous meetups, and we had a lot of discussions. What is Crystal? Yeah, pretty cool. It's looks slick, but is it actually, does it work? Is production ready? So a little bit about me. So my name is Wander and Hillen. I work at a company here in Amsterdam called WeTransfer. These are some pictures from my old job where I looked way fancier. Like WeTransfer is not anything like this, but like this was in Syria. And this one you can't actually see me, but I'm somewhere in there. I studied weapons engineering, which is rather like programming. A lot of those things are computer driven these days. And why do I think I'm qualified to have an actual talk about Crystal to the Ruby community in Amsterdam? At WeTransfer, we built a microservice, medium-sized media service, that it does about 25 million requests per day today. It differs a little bit over the weekend, but on average. And we have had a lot of experience, both good and bad, so I would like to talk to you about, like, should you do it? And at the end, I hope you have a better idea on what. So a little about Crystal, what we're going to talk about, like, what is it? Then let's talk a little bit about our peggercorn service. And in the end, like, the key question, like, are you sure you want it? Because, like, it has a lot of upsides, but also some downsides. So what is Crystal? Crystal is a relatively young programming language that brands itself as slick as Ruby, fast as C. So Ruby, while we all love it, is not necessarily the most performant language if you have really computationally heavy programs that you want to run. But what Ruby is really good at is for developer happiness. It has a syntax that really maps well to what a lot of people think. Like, how should I do it? Oh, I just type it like this, and then 99 of the 100 times it just works. So that is something that and they also wanted a little bit more assuration that what they actually programmed was correct, and they wanted to find out if it was correct, not when it blew up when a user was trying it out, but as soon as possible. And that's where a lot of the type checking comes back, but as we will see later, they do that in a very sensible way. And finally, they as you can see, like Kamal is basically the same library as Sinatra. And I hope that is clear from this example, but it's quite similar. But what is not similar is in how many throughput. So it was obviously a toy example, literally the hello world of web requests, but it does put 10 times as many requests per second on a single call. And that is nice. And that really showcases some of what Crystal gives us, is that it is just faster. It has a lot less overhead than the Ruby we're all familiar with. And it can really do a lot more optimizations during the compilation process. So the type system is another feature that both enables higher speed, but also helps you catch errors quicker. So there has always been a lot of debate, are types great? Yeah, they slow me down. But yeah, but if you have to release a fix, it also slows you down. So here we have an example of a fully typed Crystal program. But as you can see, none of the types actually have to be written down. So imagine you have some variable x from higher up. And if x plus 2 equals 3, then you assign the 1, which is clearly a number, to A, and otherwise you assign hello, which is clearly a string to A. So at the end of this, what is the type of A? Well, you might say, like, you can't really know because you don't know what x is, but you can say it's either a number or a string, and that's exactly how it works. So at this point, it's either a number, in this case a 32-bit integer, or it is a string. And you will see that the language will use this information to try and catch errors for you. So if you say, like, I want to add 1, which is a number, to A, what should the answer be? Well, in this case, the answer is you cannot do this because you cannot add numbers and strings. And this is an error that would have been there anyway in any program. But in Ruby, it blows up when you try to run it, and in Crystal, it blows up when you try to compile it, which is hopefully earlier. And that should allow you to ship less errors to your users. So let's have another example. We create a new array that contains 32-bit integers and stuff it inside the variable A, right? Then we do some things to it. Maybe we add some actual values to A. Maybe we mutate some values in our array. And then sometime later we take the 24th of A1 element of A and put it into B. Like, does anyone want to guess what is now the type of B? Yeah, I see guess.
Integer or undefined meaning.
Yes, very good. So it is possible that we haven't got to the 23rd index yet. So it is a number or nil. Like we saw earlier, the types expand if the compiler cannot pin it down to one thing, but they can also contract again. So the compiler is smart enough to see that in this unless block, it is not possible for B to actually be nil. So C is now much more constrained in its type. It has to be an int 32 because it cannot be a nil anymore. So in this way, the types really propagate and you get a lot of checking without actually having to type any of these things. So the compiler puts them all in for you. This is nice because one of the chief programmer virtues is to be as lazy as possible. I don't want to do any typing. And I really like that the computer can do more of the boring stuff for me. So another thing, you can make classes. They have the exact same syntax as in Ruby. But you can have a JSON.mapping in there. And it will automatically, you have to tell it, like, how do I want to convert this class to and from JSON? And you automatically get to JSON and from JSON methods on your class, which do exactly what you think. And also accessors for all the keys in the JSON mapping. So let's have an example for this one as well. So this is another Sinatra-like thing, endpoint. As you can see, like here we do this packacorn request from JSON with the request body, and then immediately it has all the accessors. And if one of my colleagues would ever call this endpoint with a JSON payload that does not conform to this mapping, you get exactly what you expect, which is a mapping error, which is a very normal exception, and that you can handle in any way you want. So in this way, you get a ton of error checking almost for free, and you can get the program language to do a lot of the boilerplate work for you. Because concurrency is an interesting topic. It is, if anyone knows how Go routines work in the Go programming language, they're basically similar to that. They are very lightweight threads. You can spin up literally millions on a single core. They communicate preferentially through messages they send to each other. And yeah, this talk was already pretty long, so I decided to make this slide a little bit shorter, because what I really want to get to is have a little bit of a case study. Like I mentioned earlier, at WeTransfer we have a microservice we call Pagacorn. We call it that because it's a unicorn, but unicorn was already taken in Ruby, so we decided to give it wings and make it a Pagacorn. It is a service we use for illegal content detection. Most of our clients use WeTransfer for very legitimate content. Sadly, not all of them, and we have an opinion about this and want to scan this. So, and let me be clear, we're not talking about some, maybe illegal in some repressive country. We're talking right straight up illegal that everyone here, I hope, would say that this is clearly illegal. So we get lists of hashes of images from the police that of these illegal images, and we want to detect them, but not just whether they are on the list with the direct hash, but also whether they have been slightly altered, whether they may have been changed in size, grayscale, or anything like that. And as you can imagine, like basically anything with image processing is very compute intensive. But this one is also has all these resizings and comparisons to do, so that certainly does not make it easier. And Ruby, while we all love it very much, intensive processing is just not what is great at. Most of our other services are basically pure Ruby. So we set up a separate microservice that we query over HTTP. You send it an image, it tells you yes or no. And it does about 25 million queries a day, like I mentioned earlier. And this is the core loop. So for those of you who are very good at math and very quick readers from a distance, this is basically a 144-dimensional distance computation in some higher dimensional space. And this method has to be computed several 100,000 times for each of those 25 million queries. So you can imagine that we do a lot of computational intensive work in this service. And it was actually a rewrite from an earlier service that we wrote in Haskell. The initial version of the Crystal, from Haskell to Crystal, took about 2 days. One of those days was a meeting day, so it clearly doesn't leave any productivity on the table. It's also much more well liked because, to my great sadness, at WeTransfer only 1.5 people actually can write Haskell and read it, and now everyone can read it because Crystal looks so similar. The Crystal version was slightly slower, but it's I benchmarked it this morning. It's still over 50 times faster than Ruby. And for those of you who care about these things, the Docker image is very reasonable as well at about 20 megabytes. So for this particular use case where we have something very computationally intensive, it made a lot of sense
to use the Crystal programming language because, as you can see, was well over 50 times faster than Ruby. At the same time, it also has the answer. So let's talk about that. But do you really want it? Do you really want it? Like usually when someone talks it up, they like end here, right? It's great, but like rewrite all the things, like maybe, right? It also has downsides, and let's have a look at this. So this is the core method of the hottest loop that I already showed. And as you can see, like it has, like what I said earlier in the presentation, is like, no, it's great, guys. You don't have to write any type signatures anywhere, and yet we do, right? Does anyone want to guess, or maybe they know why we put it in here? We wanted unsigned integers is close, but not entirely correct. Yes, that's I'll repeat it for you and for the people at home in the live stream. The compiler can actually do a lot more optimizations if you add in as much information. So what you can see here, like this is just a number. All the operations it does is just, you know, addition, subtraction, exponentiation. Those are just operations on numbers, but they work on any numbers with any number of bits.
Use it a lot, it's very useful. Shards is the bundler equivalent. It also works, but it's definitely not bundler quality. You know, it just pulls a lot of stuff directly from GitHub. It works, right? But it's not as fast and not as nice. Yeah, and this may be a big plus or a big minus for you. I haven't really gotten used to the expect syntax. But yeah, I posted the first version of a test, and my colleague was like, you know, only lowercase. Wow, he was not amazed. So yes, I would definitely encourage everyone to try it out. Put it like even if it's really over-engineered, like this little package on a big card. Even if it's your personal blog and you don't actually need 50,000 requests per second, or maybe you do. Yeah, it's great fun. It's a very nice little language. It's pretty much as nice as Ruby, and yeah, I love it. I hope to use it more, but it's definitely something that has parts where it shines and parts where you'll better be off using it. Questions? You were first. Yes, yes.
Okay, so thank you so much for that. I recently stumbled on Crystal and I realized that it was used to develop an alternative to React.js. I can't remember the name of the solution right now. Okay, so but I was worried about adoption because I did a little bit of research, I did a bit of check, and I had some concerns about picking up a technology like Crystal on and this is my concern. Communism, right? Can you get enough support? Can you get, because one of the things we do when we pick up new text like this is we struggle a lot with keeping up, right? So I'm talking about the alternative to React.js, which was built with Crystal. Do you think it's safe to pick up this kind of technology at the start, or just experiment with it and not make a bold move, for example, to replace some of your more stable technology?
Can you repeat it so
Yeah. I will repeat the question for everyone, also for the people on the live stream. So that you know. The question was, I'm going to paraphrase a little bit. It is a young language. Is it actually safe to pick this up? And how will you know that it doesn't collapse in you, basically? Yeah, I would love to say that I know the answer, but I really don't. For us, we use it for internal microservers, and what we really like about it is that even if you only know Ruby and not Crystal yet, you can basically pick it up in a couple of days. So, and the biggest risk we would have is that even if all Crystal development stops going whatsoever, then we still have the old version, like it won't suddenly stop working, right? So this is a small microservice. It is basically feature complete, and it doesn't have that many dependencies. So for us, like our thing would stop working. It has no sort of real avenues for critical security bugs that must be fixed by someone other than us. And it is, yeah, like even if development stops, we could presumably just leave it running forever and it wouldn't change its function that much. So in our case, we're not really worried about the potential stability of the language, and the benefits for us are more than large enough to take this gamble. Would we replace our next Rails app with it? Probably not. For something that is really user-facing and would need a lot of updates, not just for features but also for security, I don't think we would do that yet. But at the same time, definitely getting there. And if it fits the performance profile that you're looking for, then it was definitely something I would recommend to check out at least. Okay. There was someone else with a question in the back.
Yes, I could Google the question, but why not? I was wondering if Crystal supports generics and things like type constraints, these kind of things, like normally it's
So once again, I'll repeat the question for everyone and for the live stream. The question was, does it support generics? And I'm glad to say yes. Yeah, I wish I had made a slide about this just so I could show you.
in general, all the things we love from like both from relatively good type systems and from Ruby work. So if you like the enumerable module works just like in Ruby, so you can just map over anything with functions, and the type checker will check it all and make sure it works. Does that answer your question?
Sounds good. Go does still have.
I hear in Go 2.0, but it's going to take a while. Any more questions?
Then there was like bright stage light in my eyes, so I couldn't see people. But now I can see all the humans, and it's scary. Welcome, welcome. Sit down. Yay. Yeah, this is version 2 of my talk using Pokemon to catch all the code smells. It's super effective. It has more glitter this time. So my name is Melanie Keatley, and I work at I work at Young Capital. We are the fastest growing employment agency in the Netherlands. So my colleagues are here. It's a lovely place to work. Lots of young, fun people. We have lots of female developers. It's like a fun place. We have Reisa, so. So I studied journalism in college, and I moved to communications afterwards because there were surprisingly not a lot of jobs in journalism. But it does mean that I'm really good at Googling things and copy pasting, and so I guess it makes sense. I switched to programming when I was 33 because I was a little bit bored. I signed up for a Rails Girls workshop in 2013, and I thought it was so cool. I opened the terminal for the first time on my computer, and I could make that thing do things, so that was yay. Yeah, a little bit of shameless self-promotion. I have t-shirts. You can find them here on Teespring, and if you use the code AMSRB10, you get 10% discount. I like to make things that I feel should exist in the world. So I'm personally very interested in the space that kind of lives between high tech and low tech. So it kind of fascinates me that right at the time that the tech industry gives us MP3 players, the vinyl industry decides to come back from literal death. The moment that we get iPads and tablets, people start buying fancy notebooks like Moleskines and Leuchtturms and that kind of thing. I like to write code, but I write it on my super clicky mechanical keyboard. That is so satisfying, because I like to pretend I work in a 1980s newsroom on my typewriter. I can buy like all the clothes I want online with the click of a button. Yet yarn stores are seeing a massive revival because people want to knit their own things. I knit this. Like the country of New Zealand cannot breed merino sheep fast enough to keep up with the demand. So like the digital world and the analog world have this like weird sort of balance thing going on. And I find that super cool. So I've been trying to get into the sort of like hardware wearable space, building circuits with conductive thread and adding LEDs to your clothes and microcontrollers and all that kind of stuff. And so recently I learned how batteries work, because I didn't really know that. This is Amy Weibowo, and she's a programmer and alumni of Honda, MIT, Airbnb, and she is also known on Twitter as Sailor Mercury, and she also designs and sells super cute t-shirts and sweaters on her website, but she also makes and sells zines. So it's kind of like an 80s thing, so I'm not sure if you're old enough, but zines are like from magazine, fanzine. I think you can still buy them if you go to like a comic book store. They'll have like a little rack of things that people have made by hand and put in a photocopier, and then you can buy them for a couple of bucks. And they've kind of been making a revival in like the tech zine. So she's got a couple. One is called Hip Hip Array, Cash Cats, and the Literal Twitter Bot zine. And that's where I learned about batteries. And so a battery has electrons on the positive and on the negative side. And in the middle, there's a barrier. You make your circuit, and the electrons move through the circuit. and it kind of makes the LEDs light up or whatever you've got attached to it. And so she explains, like, why do these electrons move? Why do they want to leave one space, go to the other space? She says, well, they're kind of like hipsters. They don't want to be around in a space where there's like too many people who are like them. They want to go to the other cooler space. It's like, oh, batteries just have hipsters in them. Okay, I get it now. So this zine also has, it explains like APIs and how to use your own Arduino, so I highly recommend it. So a little thing about me, I learned coding on the job, and a lot of people who are career changers do that. So cool. But a problem is sometimes you kind of learn enough to copy paste something from Stack Overflow, and then it kind of works enough, it's fine, and then you move on to another thing because your product owner is standing next to your desk and you have another ticket to do. So it's kind of on you to sometimes look back and say, oh, here's what I know, but here's like a little gap and I need to plug that thing. So I was talking to my colleague Kevin last week, and I was like, oh man, I hate SQL, absolutely hate it, but it's because I'm really bad at it. And so Kevin was like, no, SQL is really fun, but you know what I'll do? I'll organize a little workshop, and then if you want to join, that's totally cool. And so I was like, oh, yeah, that's cool. And I was immediately slightly worried that I would be like the worst performer in Kevin's SQL class, and I don't want that. So I thought, I'll just go to Codecademy or something online, and I'll do that thing, and then at least I'll know a bit more than everybody else, and I'll feel good about myself. But it was terrible. It was like, type this, click run, here's your query, ta-da. I was like, I don't get it, and you need to explain to me in pictures what's happening. And I was having like a little moment behind my desk, like, I can't do this. And if only there was like a fun zine that would explain this it's kind of in a way that makes sense for my brain. And apparently there was. This is Julia Evans, and she's a programmer from Montreal. And she has written a bunch of zines that are like, oh shit, Git, bite-sized Linux, networking, but also become a select star. And that's the one I'm currently working through. And so I'm not the only one who's apparently a fan of tech zines. This is like a whole thing. There's like 2 fairs in the US that you can go to. Canadians have hopped on board. And yeah, like what they do is kind of let makers and designers focus. What they say is they focus on the link between sort of the intimacy and communal spirit of the zine scene, if that's a word, and kind of democratizing tech. So I think that's like a really interesting space, having physical pieces of paper where someone is explaining something to you in an interesting way. But it's about tech. So I am a knitter, and I love watching conference talks while I'm knitting, because then I can feel super, super productive. And so a while ago, I was watching Sandy Metz and her RailsConf talk get a whiff of this, and it was about code smells. And in her talk, she references this book, Refactoring, by Kent Beck and Martin Fowler, a lot. And I don't know if you know this book, but it's like really, really big. It's really big. And so in her talk, she discusses this reference guide made by a company called Industrial Logic. And on this side, it tells you a smell, a code smell. And then on this side, it tells you where in the book you can find a way to combat that code smell. And like I saw this, and in my brain, I was like, it kind of looks like a strategy guide. So I used to play a lot of video games as a kid, And you can find these things online now. But my sister and I we used to go to like a physical store and buy a magazine. And they would have these strategy guides in them. And it would say like, oh, if you have rock Pokemon, they're weak against water. And fire Pokemon are great against bug type Pokemon. And so for some reason, like this code smell or reference guide and the Pokemon strategy guide, they kind of fused together in my brain and became one thing. And Pokemon are actually pretty similar to code smells. Like Pokemon are, they all belong to a group, and they have funny names, and they have a certain way of being defeated. And so I just thought, why don't I just, I'll just design some characters or Pokemon for each of the code smells. And then I can explain to my own brain kind of how they work. And so that's what I did. And let's go through them, I guess. This is the dispensables group. It's kind of easy to get into. This is Chatcula, and he represents comments code smells. Now this brings me to a thing about code smells. Having a comment in your code isn't inherently bad. It's just that if you need a whole bunch of them for your code to make sense to other people, then you probably want to do some refactoring. So keep that in mind. This is Containeron. This is the data class code smell. And this class kind of functions as a giant container. And it's used by other classes, but it doesn't really do very much on its own. This is copy-free. It's the duplicate code smell, duplicate code smell. And yeah, people are always like, oh no, duplicating code is terrible, and I never do that. But it actually happens secretly, like all the time, because you have like a giant code base, and at some point nobody really knows what's left and right anymore, and you have a ticket to do, so you just make it. Sleep sore is the lazy class code smell. So if you have a really big code base, it costs time and money, and people are working on it, and you have to pay those people. And if you have classes that really are not earning their keep, so to speak, they are just like wasting people's time, maybe there's a way to get rid of them. This is a Dedric. This is dead code. So if something is not being used, you need to get rid of it. This one is one of my favorites. This is maybe use, and it represents the speculative generality code smell. So, we all know we want to build for now, and what do we need now? But sometimes it's really hard to not have your brain go, I'll just make it like super easy to add stuff later, or I'll just add this little thing here because we might need it. So that's what this code smell is all about. The next group is change preventers. There are only 3 code smells in this group. This is Diminitron, and it represents divergent change. So when you're changing a class, and then you're forced to make a whole bunch of method changes. So say you have, you're adding a product type, and then you need to change all the methods for finding and displaying and ordering. This is Shudoid, and it represents shotgun surgery. So you're in shotgun surgery hell if you're making a modification in your code, and then you have to make like a bunch of tiny little changes everywhere. This is Iceberger, and it represents parallel inheritance hierarchies. So this is where you make changes to a subclass, and then you need to make changes to another subclass of the parent class, and you get a thing. Bloaters are code smells that bloat your classes and methods so much that they become really, really difficult to work with. This is Longtron, a long method. Largoth, really large class. Listilla is the long parameter list. Clumpling, data clumps. And Prometrion is primitive obsession. It's when you use primitives instead of small objects, and it's not the right tool for the right job. And that kind of reminded me of trying to fit a square peg into a round hole. So this group is called couplers. This is Fancy, and it is the CodeSmell feature envy. So this method accesses data from other classes more than its own data. And to me, this is like a little guy that kind of looks over the fence, and grass is always greener on the other side. And that kind of reminded me of that TV show with the neighbor in the backyard, Home Improvement, and that's why I just gave him a little fishing hat. This is Grabite, inappropriate intimacy. This is when your class uses the internal fields and methods of other classes. Chain run or message chains. So this is when your code is structured like a series of message chains. And this kind of reminded me of that game you used to play as a kid, Chinese Whispers, where you kind of whisper something to one kid, and then that kid whispers it to another kid, and then you go through the whole group, and at the end you have a completely different word than where you started out with. This is middle manager, represents the middleman, CodeSmell. And this is where you have a class that only has one job, and that is to tell everybody else what to do. So the last group is OO abusers. So these are all incomplete or inaccurate applications of OO programming. This is SwitchZilla, which is the super complicated switch statement. Tempty is temporary field CodeSmell. It kind of gets some value sometimes. Sometimes it's empty. It's hard to see from the code what's going on. It's not good. This is my absolute favorite CodeSmell. This is a refused bequest. And so it kind of reminds me of like I have a son who is 4 years old, and like if I give him food, he'll like eat some of the food and then but none of the vegetables. And refused bequest is like that. It's like a subclass only uses some of the methods and properties of the parent class, but not everything. So it reminded me of that. This is same clops or alternative classes with different interfaces. So two classes perform identical functions, but they have different method names. And it kind of reminded me of Pepsi and Cola, so I made them look like cans. So this is a little bit of a silly thing to do, right? To make drawings for your CodeSmell. But for me, it kind of helped retain this information, understand it a little bit better. It was also just fun. But I just kind of wanted to know, like, why does this help? Why is this like a fun thing to do? And so I did a little bit more research, and I stumbled across this study from 2016 by the University of Waterloo in Canada. And they did all these experiments on memory recall, and they would have like one group of people write down all these words, and they would have the other group of people make pictures for the words. And they would like let them do that for a little bit, take them away, let them come back, and then quiz them on how many words they could remember. And so it turns out that the people who were doing all the pictures could remember way more words, twice as many words as the people writing them down. There's a reason why picture memory is kind of superior in that way. So your brain is very much geared to visual information. If you draw a tree, it kind of connects to all the thousands of pictures of trees that you've seen in your life and have stored in your brain. What's also great news is that if you're not a great designer like me, it doesn't matter. even if your drawings are crappy, your memory recall is still good. So it's not just about memory retention. Scientists believe that sort of like the rhythmic motion of making sketches is actually relaxing to humans, and it conquers our fight or flight instincts. And it reduces cortisol, which is the body's stress hormone. And so it kind of makes sense, right? Humans are visual creatures, so these things feel good to us. A study from Drexel University shows that the process of making art, it stimulates your brain's reward center. This was me trying to like draw a brain, sorry for that. But it has the same effect on people as dancing and laughing and eating chocolate. And yeah, participants for that study also reported feeling more creative, and they felt like they could better solve problems afterwards. So generally speaking, humans are better at visualizing images than processing visual data than processing text. We process images 60,000 times faster than text. And 90% of the information that is being sent to your brain is visual information. But when we are at work, this is usually what we're looking at. So I'm not saying that we should all burn our computers and start coding in pictures or something. But I think sort of like visual information can help us in other parts of our day-to-day, so to speak. So if you're like trying to grasp like a complex principle or trying to, you know, explain something to a colleague, I tried to write down the law of Demeter here, so you cannot pick your nose, or you can pick your nose, you can pick your friends, but you cannot pick your friend's nose. If you do it like that, it's more fun. So, but also, if you are trying to explain to your product owner why is something complex and why is it going to take longer than they think it is, you know, write it down on paper and sketch it out for them. Are you designing an app? Write it on paper and show your stakeholders, like, is this thing, is that what you want? It's going to work like this. You don't have to code anything yet. You can just show them on paper. And like, I feel like we can do better in sort of giving information to our colleagues and the people that we work with. So let's all get like whiteboard markers. It's what we do at Young Capital. Our walls are all glass, and we write on them like all day long. The window cleaners were not happy with us this week. So I wanted to kind of leave you with this. This is an article from last week. A third of Dutch IT workers regularly considers leaving the field. That's a third. That's a lot. And they were saying that the constant pressure of having to learn and having to keep up was getting to them. And I think that if we make learning more fun and not just tell people, well, if you don't understand it, read the effing RTF of 70 pages, but maybe we can help people make this more interesting, more fun, and keep that pressure that they put on themselves, keep it down. Because not only do we need new people in this industry, but we need to retain the people that we have. It's such a waste if we let them go. So on that fun note, go forth and draw. Thank you. Questions? No, right? No, okay, good. Oh, there's a question.
Do you actually sell these as a zine or?
These what?
The Pokemon ones that you made, do you actually sell them as a
Not yet, but I have been considering it because I think it will be fun. Svetlana is going to help me.
Yes!
Woo!
Let's do it, girl.
Okay.
Which you can sell on Catawiki, right? So
Oh my God, yes.
Oh my God!
It's all coming together now.
Matt has a question.
So I just want to make a comment. I think it's really an amazing idea to personalize and give things names. For me too, it's really difficult for me to understand a lot of things. For example, one of my best books is Grokking Algorithms in Python. But I can't remember the name of the author, but he used lots of drawings to explain, stuff. So I really love what Melanie has done. Naming things makes it easier for us. So I imagine looking at code now and saying, oh, look, that's the copy dude, or that's the, the big class guy. So it's easier to say, and it kind of makes it more fun. Thanks so much, Melanie.
Thank you. Yes?
About how you learned, because you learned it in already like a company environment. So we're with a few people from like a coding bootcamp, so we're already getting these like, yeah, do this, like all of these tips. Like, was it hard for you in the beginning to pick that up, or?
I definitely struggled in the beginning, yeah.
So how did you cope with that? These things at that time?
I definitely sometimes try and relate things to like how, I don't know, like a real world example, or not even a real world example, but just kind of make it fun in my brain. So like for me, I used to play a lot of video games, and for me like dynamic typing it's like Kirby, because if you know Kirby, he can like suck up other, he can be like a knight, or he can be a doctor, or he can be, I don't know, anything. So I try to make it sort of like something in the real world to help me understand the concept. Yeah.
Thank you, Melanie.
Yay!
So that ends the meetup of tonight. We have till 20:45, and then we have to leave the building, because then security will come in and kick us out. And well, no, it's not that bad, but we have to leave the building at 20:45. So please stay a bit longer till then. Have a few drinks, and if you have any questions, then we're all here. Enjoy.